There have been many good drafts for quarterbacks throughout the history of the NFL. You've got the iconic class of 1983, which produced 3 Hall of Famers in John Elway, Dan Marino, and Jim Kelly. You've got the class of 2004, which produced 3 of the greatest quarterbacks of the 21st century in Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, and Phillip Rivers. You've got the class of 2020, where it seemed like every quarterback taken early on has gone on to have some success in this league, from Joe Burrow to Tua Tagovailoa to Jordan Love to Jalen Hurts to Justin Herbert. However, the 1980 draft class was not one of them. It was most definitely not one of them. There were 2 quarterbacks taken in the first round that year, with those 2 men being Mark Wilson of the Oakland Raiders and Mark Malone of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Both quarterbacks are men that are widely considered to be busts. The list of quarterbacks taken in the 1980 draft is a list of nothing but either bad players or, at a bare minimum, below average players, where not a single quarterback taken in that class made it to a Pro Bowl or did anything really of note. Eric Hipple might legitimately be the best quarterback from that draft, which tells you everything that you need to know. There were 17 quarterbacks taken in that class, and from top to bottom, outside of David Woodley guiding the Miami Dolphins to the Super Bowl in 1982, and I use the word guided in the loosest definition possible, because that's like saying Trent Dilfer guided the Baltimore Ravens to the Super Bowl, no one had much of a memorable career. Having said that, while the actual class itself from an on-the-field standpoint might have been extremely forgettable and mediocre, the process to get there for the final quarterback taken in that class was anything but that. Because this man that you've been watching this entire time is Arkansas quarterback Kevin Scanlon. And during the 1980 NFL Draft, as in the very first draft to ever be televised, Scanlon had quite the experience that was unforgettable and deserves a deep dive today. Because even though you probably never heard of it before today's video, it shows you everything that you shouldn't do during the draft on the agent's side. Because let's just say if the agent had one job and he failed miserably at it, and it's something that I highly doubt can happen today due to how the draft is covered. Because this is the story behind Kevin Scanlon, and one of the dumbest, craziest draft stories that you've never heard of before. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL and the NFL Draft with stories like this one. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for your support as we try and grow this community even more. And with that in mind, let's talk about the most surprising NFL draft pick of all time for one man in particular. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand just who this man right here, Kevin Scanlon, was, and how good of a player he was for the Arkansas Razorbacks. In 1979, the Razorbacks were coming off of one of their most successful seasons in program history. They ended the season with a 10-2 record under the guidance of head coach Lou Holtz, and won the Southwest Conference, making it to the Sugar Bowl before losing to national champion Alabama. And a big reason why Arkansas was so good in 1979 was because of the play of Kevin Scanlon, their star quarterback. Scanlon hadn't done a lot in his collegiate career prior to 1979. He started out at NC State before transferring after not throwing a single touchdown pass in his first 2 seasons with the Wolfpack. And in 1978, he played sporadically as a backup. But in 1979, his lone season as the starter, oh man did he deliver, to the point where he was inducted into the Arkansas Sports Hall of Fame and the Southwest Conference Hall of Fame. During that 1979 season, Scanlon was an extremely accurate passer, setting the school record at the time by completing over 66% of his passes. Not only could he throw the ball well, but he was a heck of a runner, as he ran the option like very few quarterbacks across the Southwest Conference and across the NCAA could do. Scanlon not only finished the 1979 season second in the Southwest Conference in passing touchdowns, but he finished third in rushing touchdowns, being responsible for more yards and touchdowns than any other player in the conference. This made him the first player in Arkansas history since Joe Ferguson in 1971 to lead the Southwest Conference in touchdowns responsible for. and also made him the first player since Joe Ferguson in 1971 to lead the conference in total yards. Scanlon led Arkansas to multiple ranked wins, including a huge win in front of a national television audience against the number 2 ranked Texas Longhorns, and he was named the Southwest Conference Player of the Year as a result of his great play on the field. I think it shows you how good he was when you realize that despite playing just one season, he made it to the Southwest Conference Hall of Fame. Usually, you have to contribute for more than one season to get any sort of lifetime recognition. Either that, or you have to be a quarterback at Colorado with the last name Sanders. But that's how good Scanlon was. We didn't know where he was going to get drafted, or if he was going to get drafted at all. His style of play definitely didn't fit the NFL, as he was more of a read option and a triple option quarterback. A very accurate one at that with a very strong arm, but still an option quarterback nonetheless. And his pocket presence was a bit shaky at times, as we saw during the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. He was also a bit undersized, and he only had a year of experience as a starter, which raised a ton of red flags, especially back then. But it was clear that the man could play, and could get a chance to compete at the next level, especially because the man was super smart. As Dick Steinberg, the director of player personnel for the Los Angeles Rams, said after the draft, Arkansas head coach Lou Holtz stopped me in the hall and said, "Hey, do yourself a favor and take a look at this kid. He's the smartest player I've ever been around." High praise from one of the greatest college coaches to ever do it, and it wasn't unwarranted considering the fact that Scanlon not only was named the Southwest Conference Scholar Athlete of the Year, but the fact that after the draft, he was an administrative aide to the governor of Arkansas, some guy named Bill Clinton. I'm not sure what he ever did afterwards, but you get the idea with Scanlon. But when the draft rolled around, Scanlon's name was not called initially. Over the course of the 2-day draft, with some of it being televised on ESPN, many quarterbacks went off the board. While guys like Craig Bradshaw, Dan Hartwig, Mike Wright, and Jimmy Jordan came off the board in the 12th-round draft, Kevin Scanlon, the Southwest Conference Player of the Year, was still not drafted. Scanlon was working with Bill Clinton, as his way of getting his mind off the draft was working and keeping himself occupied. But you can only do so much to keep your mind off of a life-changing event. As Scanlon said, "I traveled with the governor the first day of the draft to keep my mind off it. The second day, I was in the office doing some work. Every time the phone rang, I jumped." And then, Scanlon got the call from his agent. He got the call that he never wanted to hear, but feared was possible. Kevin Scanlon had gone undrafted. All 333 picks had been made. All 12 rounds had concluded, and Scanlon was not one of them. Absolutely gutting. If Scanlon was going to make it in the NFL and continue his professional football career, he'd have to sign on somewhere else as an undrafted free agent and hope for the best. I don't know who Scanlon's agent was, but he was the one who broke the news to him, and that was that. Except, there was just one small problem with all of this. There was just one teeny tiny problem that Scanlon's agent didn't take into account when he made that call. And that was the fact that, oh yeah, the draft was still going on. It was still going on. For some reason, Scanlon's agent thought that the draft was over and felt that it was time to deliver the bad news to his client that his dream of playing in the NFL was basically over. And it wasn't. It was still very much happening, which made it extremely awkward and confusing when Scanlon got a call from the Los Angeles Rams immediately after the call from his agent, and heard from Dick Steinberg and head coach Ray Malavasi that he was the newest member of the team and was selected by the NFC champion in the 12th round with pick number 332. Imagine taking a test at school and the TA calls you up and says, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but you failed the exam." But meanwhile, the teacher hasn't even finished grading the exam, and you did just fine, because even though it didn't start off well in the first few multiple choice questions, you were able to rebound near the back end of the test and pass. Imagine an airport announcing that a flight had been canceled because the plane wasn't going to land. Meanwhile, the plane is literally in midair and is starting its initial descent and is going to get there on time just fine. Yet, that's exactly what happened here. Because for as smart as Kevin Scanlon was, He had an absolutely insane agent who somehow failed the #1 rule of being an agent, which is to not tell your client news that isn't true. As Scanlon said about all of this, I had just hung up from my agent. He told me he thought the draft was over, but the phone rang and someone told me to hold for Dick Steinberg and Ray Malavasi. I was really sweating it out. It was just a pleasant surprise. And yeah, pleasant surprise might be the understatement of the century. It's like a girl who rejects you and then 1 hour later thinks it over and changes her mind. You thought it was over and had no shot, and then boom, everything changed. You thought the draft was over because your agent, who's supposed to know these things and be following it, said so. And next thing you know, it's not. Somehow, this wasn't a problem with any other player. At least to my knowledge, I don't know of a single player who had an agent call him up and tell him that he didn't get drafted and that the draft concluded. And that turned out to be completely false information. But for Kevin Scanlon and his agent, apparently, it was. And it's even more insane in 1980, considering the fact that at the time, the draft was easier than ever to follow due to coverage about it taking place on ESPN for the first time, even if the final rounds were not televised. Just a bizarre situation in so many ways, where Scanlon's agent jumped the gun for some inexplicable reason, and it backfired pretty badly. Scanlon, like so many 12th round picks, never played a single down in the NFL, as he was one of the first men cut by the Rams once training camp started. There were 28 guys taken in the 12th round of that 1980 NFL draft, and of those 28 guys, 20 of them, or more than 71%, never suited up in a game, including Scanlon. Of the 8 that did, 2 of them were out of the league after the 1980 season. Another 2 were out of the league after the 1981 season, and 1 of them played 1 game during the strike in 1987 as a replacement player. So whether or not you want to count him or not and put a giant asterisk next to that is up to you. Outside of wide receiver Calvin Muhammad and kicker Mike Lansford, who was drafted by the Giants but played no games for the team, no one from the 12th round that year, including Kevin Scanlon, did anything of note on the field. The 12th round was an educated dart throw at this point in history. But even though Scanlon never played a single down in the NFL, this man right here had one of the craziest draft stories of all time. He started the draft working and traveling alongside Bill Clinton as his right-hand man, then had his agent feed him false information by telling him that he wasn't drafted, only for him to get a call later on informing him that he had in fact been drafted, and that his agent was absolutely clueless as to how the NFL draft actually worked. Something like this would not be possible today, seeing as the draft is televised across every round and seeing how news travels today. You know when the draft is starting today, and you know when the draft is ending. And to be fair, everyone else did except for Scanlon's agent. Because in 1980, somehow, this was actually a thing that happened. Because in 1980, Kevin Scanlon's agent did anything but put his person first. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.